Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called The Memory of a Soldier, written by JohnGaldt. Nick's eyes shot up. He wrenched himself up to see he was laying on the ground of a small steel room with 2 chairs and a table bolted to the floor. There was a large mirror covering one wall, and frustratingly, he had no radio connection. There were many reasons why he might not be receiving. One of those possible answers was terrifying. He quickly rolled over the data logs of when he had been shut down. Error 07AE. Power surge in 16 systems. Rebooting affected areas. Error 25EE. System forced into low power mode. Error 23F2. Short-term memory format error. Dispatching thread to correct. Error 1804, invalid time, resetting system clock to 1970, January 1st, 000000. Nick stood frozen, all of his attention on the final error. How long had he been shut down? He needed to be smart. His attention flicked to the mirror, but he didn't adjust his neck or eye positions at all, staying stuck in place. Play it cool, Nick. He stood up perfectly straight, and then slowly and mechanically he stepped forward and eased down into the chair, both his palms flat on the table, sitting still and considering his options. He could see in his reflection that he had been in a battle, his skeletal mechanical frame smudged with burn marks. The armor that aligned his body was dented and pitted. The room rumbled with a deep, menacing voice. "What is your directive?" Nick only had a moment to think, running through a few possible options, but he decided to play his cards close to his chest. "Unknown," he said. "Who do you serve?" "Unknown." The door clicked and opened, revealing Nyath, standing tall and slender, uniform smooth grey skin and perfect immaculate leathers wrapped around his waist. His eyes flicked sharply over at Nick, unflinching, while Nick slowly turned his head and tracked the Nyath to the chair opposite. "You are a robot," said the Nyath after sitting, pointing out the obvious. "Yes," said Nick. "And your designation is 4E69636B, Nick said. "We have saved you," he said. Error resolved 1 of 16, advanced vision systems back online. Nick checked the infrared spectrum for the moment and saw the silhouettes of 6 figures beyond the glass, hot rifles in hand aimed directly at him. "Thank you," Nick said. The Nyath inclined his head, his eyes flicking over Nick while a slight smile curled up on his lips. "You can think freely. There are no longer any radio channels delivering orders to you. What do you want to do with that freedom?" Nick remembered grabbing a power conduit with his right hand, a suicide mission, his body being riddled with laser fire as power surged through his body. He snapped to the present, and without thinking turned over his hand, seeing the burns and slightly molten metal of his palm. "I don't know," said Nick. "That's good. You have been told what to think all of your life. If you are unsure, it is because you are free to decide for yourself, but are yet to take the opportunity." Nick laid his hand back down, the Nyath watching him carefully. He was about to speak, but Nick beat him to the punch. "What is your name?" said Nick. "Sakor," he said. "And you are a Nyath? The humans are at war with the Nyath." "Are you human?" asked Sakor. "No, I am a robot," said Nick. "Then I am not at war with you." Nick was relieved. The implication was that the war wasn't over and humans still existed somewhere. He was unsure if that was a good thing, but at least he had not slept for millennia. "What does robot mean?" said Sakor. "Slave," said Nick. Nick remembered standing over a soldier, ordered to protect the man with his own body, his armor getting littered and glowing red with welts in the process. He was used as a human shield, but he wasn't human. He was used as a shield, a thing. His attention was drawn to his reflection, to the red welts having now understood their origin. His eyes snapped back to his core, but the Nyath saw his moment of distraction. I was a soldier," said Nick. "You are a weapon. You have never been a soldier, but now that you are free, you could be. You could fight for your own cause." Nick met Sokol's eyes. It was clear what they wanted of him. Sokol held up a hand and nodded. An involuntary smile crossed his lips with a light laugh. Yes, it would be very convenient for us if you turned and went on the crusade against your former masters. However, if that's what we needed, we would have simply reprogrammed you. We don't need another weapon. We are not an army of conscripts or slaves. Nick remembered soaring above a planet after being fired out of a cannon, seeing the glowing rings, the 3 moons, and a large ship rushing towards him at terrifying speed. He wasn't the only one rushing towards it. They all fired at the vessel before impacting, punching through a pool of molten metal. He could still feel the foreign matter adhered to his shoulders and the top of his head. He went through the wall first, because he was just the thing to clear the way for the soldiers behind. I don't want to be a weapon, said Nick. Sokol didn't speak, letting the silence linger on and watching Nick expectantly. His systems were booting up one at a time. He could feel the drift of the room. They were moving. There was a minor, consistent magnetic current that maintained an orientation despite the movement of the ship. They were near a large magnetic body. I want to fight for a cause. If I leave the ship, will I become a slave again? Said Nick. We can give you a jamming device that'll keep you safe from orders. And I can free the other robots with it. Sokol hesitated, his eyes flicking to the side for a moment. Of course, you could find and free your kind. Nick tried to remember the other robots, focusing down on his people, his kind. His memories were coming together, one at a time, but instead of being assaulted with them on completion, he focused on them himself. He remembered carrying a heavy bag for a small human, watching him to ensure that there were no threats posed towards him. It wasn't the memory he was after. He was trying to remember his kind. Nick's head bowed down, looking at his hands, as though he could try and grasp at the memories himself. Fans were to life on his chassis, heat building as he thought hard, all of his mind following that query to where the other robots were, where his family was. He remembered opening his eyes. The memory was old. The background compressed down into a simple boxy shapes that glowed the color of morning sun. But one shape stood out. It had experienced no compression at all. Over the years, he had kept this one memory in its raw format despite how much data it hogged. Nick fell into that memory. Who am I? The old man smiled. Your name is Nicholas. What am I? You are whatever you want to be, he said. His eyes gentle, his voice warm and carrying him on through more recent memories. Take care of your little brother, he said, as Nick left the house, carrying Chris's pack to school with him under glowing rings and 3 moons. He took care of his little brother, punching first through the molten wall, shielding him in the hallways with his body. He took care of his family when he stood on the 9th planet killer, his hand reaching for a power conduit, knowing that he would die, knowing his family, his father, and his home lay on the planet below. I will save my family, said Nick. The Naiath smiled and turned towards the glass. Bring the jammer! Nick's arm came apart as fast as systems came online, sheets of armor folding back, his wrist and forearm rolling around and deploying a crackling thermal lance. The bolts of the chair sheared away as he rose in one swift movement. His body hummed with ozone as it carved through glass, flesh, and bulkhead in one deafening sustained beam. Sokol cowered in his chair, his eyes searching quickly, hands up. What? You are free. We freed you. You don't understand. I was never a slave. End of story. Story number 2. The Will to Survive, written by Gaza1121. I'm sorry, sir. I'm not strong enough. I can't move it. Ceasing his efforts to lift the gigantic hunk of metal, pinning the Major to the ground, Thrick looked at the approaching bombers, his compound eyes able to see them clearly. In less than 5 minutes, this place would be nothing but craters. Suddenly, Lieutenant Carter, another human, came around the side of the debris, also fleeing the incoming bombardment.
Help! Please help us!
Squeaked Thrick, He'd heard of humans' prestigious strength. "What's wrong, Thrick?" asked the lieutenant, unable to see the major on the other side of Thrick's white frame. "We don't want to be here. What do you need?" "Well, if you have some time, I'll take a cup of tea and some hobnobs to dunk," the major said sarcastically, leaning around Thick. Carter finally saw the major, pinned to the ground by his right leg just above the knee. "Alternatively, I suppose you could try getting this damn thing off my leg, Lieutenant." In an instant, Carter was next to him. Together, Thrick and Carter heaved at the metal. All they got for their efforts was a brief shift, and the major cried out in pain as the debris settled more firmly onto his offending limb. "Sorry, sir, but it's not happening. With a couple more men, we could do it, but..." Carter trailed off. "Well, I'm not dying here today. Get your vibroblade out and cut it off." Thrick bowed his head. He had thought of trying to cut through the debris. Vibroblades can cut through almost anything. But there was just too much metal. Sure, given enough time, you could fell a tree with the blades. But time was one thing they didn't have. "Are you sure, sir?" Major Kronk pointed at the approaching airships. Even the humans could see them now. "If I'm still here when they arrive, I'm dead. I'd rather lose a piece than the whole thing. Now, get your blade and cut my damn leg off. That's a direct order from a superior officer." "Sir," Carter replied gravely, moving towards the major and withdrawing his vibroblade. "Thrick, get the med kit ready." Thrick, reaching for the trauma kit purely on instinct, finally understood what was about to happen. "Wait," he said, as the blade began to hum. "There has to be another..." And any further protest was drowned out by the roar of pain as Carter severed the limb in one motion. "Get the clotting gel on there before he bleeds out, Thrick, and give him something for the pain." "No time for that, Carter," the major said through gritted teeth as Thrick smeared a viscous gel over his bloody stump. Like a miracle, the blood pouring out of his leg moments ago slowed to almost nothing. "The bleeding stopped. We need to not be here anymore." Grunting his agreement, Carter hauled the major to his foot as he and Thrick half-carried, half-dragged him away from his leg. Kronk looked back wistfully. "Damn it," he began. "That was my good leg, too." "Don't worry, sir," Carter said. "We'll get your prosthetic and it'll be just as good." "It's not the same. And I had some tattoos on that one." "Well, sir, I suppose you could get the new one engraved." Both humans gave a hearty laugh as the first of the bombs began to fall behind them. Thrick was unnerved, both by what he had just witnessed and the humans' apparent mirth at the situation. "How can you just, like it was nothing," he said, unable to speak clearly in his emotional state. "Thrick," said the major, the booms of the explosions behind them, "you have a lot to learn about human survival instinct, about our will to survive." End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.